God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, be with you and remain with you now and
Golden hands just thank ya. You chose the forces of patty around those quick name and the quick ram over all the
Hi there everyone, Jack here again at the Vinyl Voyage. So today's video is one that I've been looking to do for quite some time. It's been buzzing around in my head for a while and I've just not got round to do it. However, a couple of weeks ago I was watching Jeff Witcher at the Vinyl Destination and he did a video called Satanic Albums That Were Banned From Entering My House or something along those lines. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty similar to, or a bit similar to what I was thinking of doing, and that gave me the impetus to get up and do it. So if you're not aware of Jeff's channel, go over, have a watch. It's really entertaining, and watch his video about satanic albums that were banned from his household. It's a great watch as well. Now, I've never been into satanic albums. I was never into any of that kind of stuff. So this video is a little bit different. I did once have a Motley Crue t-shirt when I was about 12 or something like that, but it's just because I liked the imagery. I was a complete fraud. I've never probably even heard of a Motley Crue song. So yeah, my video was not to do with satanic albums, but it is to do with some albums that were frowned upon in terms of coming into my house. And it's certainly about albums that got, over the years, under the skin of the people who have been around me. So probably more albums that have pissed people off and drove them crazy. Now, that's something that's definitely happened a lot over the years, and it started very, very early on. So to give you a bit of context, my mum and dad were big music fans. My dad was into Pink Floyd. Both my parents were big into the Stones, the Beatles. My dad liked things like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and my mum liked Bob Dylan, and generally speaking, they liked good music. However, it was all fairly mainstream, and I followed in their footsteps. I worshipped at the altar of the Beatles. And you know, my early years, I loved the Beatles, I loved the Stones, I loved the Monkees, I loved the Who, and it was all kind of the things that my mum and dad listened to, and that's what I loved as well. But in every music nerd or every music fanatic's life, you get to the point where you start branching out and listening to your own sounds, and that's where the cracks started to appear in terms of the musical relationship between myself and my parents. So yeah, this is probably the first album that started to piss them off. So I was into kind of skateboarding when I was probably about 10 to about 13, and I was really into skateboarding. There was a lad who lived down the street who I used to skateboard with. He was a couple of years older than me, and I used to go down to his house and he used to play records. And at the time I was just a Beatles nut, that's all I liked. But slamming to the Beatles doesn't really work. He was into NWA and he used to play me straight out of Compton. And being 11 and 12, I loved this album. And I probably just loved it for all the swearing and all the controversial themes. He was also into Suicidal Tendencies, and we used to play that song Possessed to Skate, which is like kind of hardcore US punk. And I remember going back to my parents one night and telling them about NWA and about Suicidal Tendencies, and if it'd be possible for me to get some albums. And I think my mum and dad dug into them a little bit, and it came back with a resounding no chance. There's no way that that type of limeage is coming into our house. So on Jeff Witcher's video, he spoke about how he'd come from quite a religious household, and to be fair, I was pretty much the same. I came from a religious house as well. So yeah, there was no chance of getting NWA past the censors. There was no chance of getting Suicidal Tendencies past them either. But I've got it now, and I love a bit of NWA. You can't go wrong. So yeah, that was probably the first time that I kind of rubbed my parents up the wrong way a little bit. But in saying that, I didn't actually get it into the house. The first one that I did get into the house though was when I was about 14. There'd been, yeah, late 80s. I started to get into the Happy Mondays. I think Bummed was the first album that I get into. This was a later album, Pills, Thrills and Bellyaches, and I loved the Happy Mondays. And by the time you get to 14, you're really discovering your own musical identity. You want to break out and listen to your own music. And it felt a little bit, as much as I love the Beatles and I love the Stones, that felt like my parents' music, whereas this was definitely for me. And I loved everything about the Happy Mondays. I loved their image, I loved their swagger, I loved that funky psychedelic sound, those acid house beats. I loved everything about the Happy Mondays. So as much as listening to the music, which I managed to get away with, I got one of my friends made me a mixtape and it was full of the Jesus and Mary Chain, the Stone Roses, the Happy Mondays, other stuff like the Wonder Stuff and all that kind of thing, then Spiral Carpets. But it wasn't a problem to get the music in. But one day I went to my local record shop, Rhythmic Records, which was a bit of a local haven for music nuts. The guys who worked in Rhythmic Records knew loads about music and they were always quick to give you recommendations and tell you about new bands or older bands that you might not have heard. But anyway, one day I went in and I wanted to get more Happy Mondays material. So instead of buying an album, I bought Happy Mondays Live at the GMX video on VHS video, and I took it home and I went straight in the videotape player and got it on. And my mum took one look at Shaun Ryder swaggering across the stage, lyrics in one hand, I think a bottle of wine in the other, and he was just like shambolic. He's reading from the lyric sheet, he was stumbling around, he's slurring his words, and my mum was absolutely horrified. That's absolutely ridiculous. This guy can't even remember the lyrics to his own songs. Look, what a disgrace, drinking like that in public, straight out of the bottle. You're going to take that video back to Rhythmic Records now, and we won't hear another word of it. There's no way that you're watching that rot in this house. So the censor had spoken. I was sent back to Greenock with my videotape in hand, and I shamedly had to go back into the record shop and go up to the musical gurus at the counter and push it across and ask for an exchange. And they said to me, "Oh, what's the problem? Did you not like it? Do you not like the Happy Mondays?" Which I wanted to be seen as someone who liked the Happy Mondays. I said, "Oh no, that's not the case, that's not the case." And then I had to come out with the humiliating truth. My mum just doesn't like it. I've been told I have to take it back. So I had to go then and pick another video, and I went with the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour VHS, and I got that instead, which I loved anyway, but I was always gutted that I didn't get that Happy Mondays Live at the GMX video past my parents. And from there, the kind of musical gulf widened, because the more that I get into 90s indie and 80s, I suppose 80s indie going into 90s indie, the more my mum and dad just didn't understand that music, because it wasn't music from their era. Their era had been, you know, my mum's first gig had been the Small Faces at Glasgow Apollo. It had been the Beatles, the Stones, the Hollies, all that great stuff. My dad had loved 70s prog, but they didn't understand the music that I was listening to when I was a teenager. And they really, really didn't understand this band. I kind of pretty much, I was able to play it in the house, so it wasn't banned. This was more about getting under their skin. Not maybe so much my dad, but certainly my mum. And it wasn't because of the artwork. It wasn't the nudity in the artwork, because that's quite tastefully done. It's shot in black and white. You've got a beautiful example of the female anatomy there. It was more to do with the fact that the Pixies are just absolute weirdos. You won't find a weirder band than the Pixies. They look like weird nerds. They sound like weird nerds. Nobody sounds like the Pixies, and I love that about them. I loved all the Spanish lyrics. I loved the weird lyrics, the kind of different time signatures, that quiet, loud thing that they had going on, which was just like really exhilarating. And they were just sounded like a really dangerous, exciting band to listen to. But yeah, too weird for my mum. And this was another one that I would be kind of chastised over listening to. "Oh, that's absolute rubbish. That's horrendous music. What are you doing listening to that? They sound like absolute oddballs." And I couldn't disagree with that, because they do sound like oddballs. But yeah, Suffer Rosa, just an absolute beauty. From the very first note, Bone Machine, which is just such a weird sounding song. The lyrics all sound weird. Break My Body, it's the same. Then you've got a few maybe more melodic bits like Where Is My Mind. But I love this album. Gigantic, tremendous stuff. But again, not one that pleased my parents. Okay, so yeah, it kind of went on like that I played music in the house that it wasn't of their time, and it would rub them up the wrong way, or my mum especially. And I kind of revelled in that. I quite enjoyed that. But then a bit later on, I managed to get under other people's skin with my musical tastes because I joined the military, I joined the RAF. And my kind of memories of music listening in the RAF would be, I'd go in with a big group of lads into a town at the weekend. They would dump me at the record shop, and then they would say, look, we're going to come back in 2 hours because they liked going in for 10 minutes to have a flick through a few albums. And they said, oh, we're always waiting here for ages for you. And I never felt too short. And they would normally leave me for about an hour to 2 hours. And I found that when I was in the military, the majority of people were into very, very mainstream music. So I'd always remember going to like the NAFI Bop, which was like a kind of military disco that were horrendous, or into the bar on a Wednesday night. And it would be absolutely packed, and the jukebox would be on, and it would be Christina Aguilera, whatever she's called, I can't even say her name, the Spice Girls, lots of other chart music. And I used to always drop some money in the jukebox, and I'd always start with the same tune, and it pretty much cleared the bar. And I would look around and see the confused faces, and they'd be kind of looking around as if to say, what weirdo put that on? And it was this. I used to stick on The Doors, and the track would always be Whiskey Bar. I would always put on the song Whiskey Bar, sorry, Alabama song, the Whiskey Bar, the old, Veal and Brecht, comes from an opera, I believe. But yeah, I love the Alabama song, Show Me the Way to the Next Whiskey Bar, Please Don't Ask Why. And I'd literally look around at everyone else in the bar who'd been dancing and grooving to Christina and the Spice Girls and what the Irish band, Bewitched, and all that kind of early 2000s pop. And then their faces would drop, the little dance floor would clear, and they would be looking around for the culprit. But I've got to say, I did it for so long that I started to notice a few people singing along after a while, a few of the pissheads who weren't really bothered about dancing. I could see a few of them getting into it after a few months of me playing Alabama songs, so I think there was a few converts. But yeah, can't beat the Doors, but that definitely got under skin. Now, RAF's all about communal living at the beginning, and you're living in a block surrounded by a lot of other young servicemen and women. And I stayed next door, so we had like single man rooms, but I stayed next door to this Welsh guy who, for want of a better word, was a arsehole. He was like, I love partying as much as anybody in those days, but yeah, once I got home to my bed, I wanted to sleep, whereas he would always invite big groups back to his room, and it would be all through the night, and when you've got work the next morning, it'd be pretty horrendous. Or even on a Friday, I'd have maybe football first thing on a Saturday morning, so I'd be out on the Friday night having a load of beers, and then you get back to your room, you just want to sleep. But he would be pumping dance music, you know, I don't know if his stereo was right up against my wall, but he would be pumping that all the way through the night, and he's just a pain in the arse. I couldn't be bothered with him. So I don't know, I always wanted to get my own back, and I always did that in the morning. Like I said, I'd be up early for football, and I'd go to the mess in the morning. But prior to going to the mess, I'd make sure that I put some music on for him, nice and loud, with the speakers up against the wall. That's how petty I was. And I always felt that, I don't know, I never didn't speak to the guy because I didn't like him. But I thought that he probably enjoyed when I played the captain of a Saturday morning. After he'd been up through the night, I always made sure that I had the captain up at full volume. It wasn't really this album. You know what album I played, because I would play it and then I would leave the room and go and get my breakfast. And it was, of course, I don't have it on vinyl, it was, of course, Trout Mask Replica. Yeah, I always sometimes wonder if he ever liked the Alabama song, if I ever turned him around to Trout Mask Replica, because he was getting it every Saturday morning for months at full volume. Classics on here, Hair Pie, Baked 2, Moonlight in Vermont's a favourite, The Dust Blows Back and Forward, and the Dust Blows Forward and the Dust Blows Back. There's nothing like the captain at full volume on a Saturday morning when you've got a horrendous hangover. So yeah, to that Welsh guy out there, if you're watching, I hope you enjoyed my Saturday morning DJ sessions where I let you hear Trout Mask Replica on repeat. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that probably got under his skin. Next up then, it would be coming home. So I like to go home regularly. When I was in the RAF, I'd go home on leave quite often. And when I went home on leave, it kind of became a running joke that my dad would ask me what kind of music I was listening to. And it was the time of iPods. I had my iPod absolutely stacked out with all the kind of weird and wonderful music that I could find. At the time, I was really into Daniel Johnston, and I was into all that kind of outsider singer-songwriter stuff, like Jandek and Rock Erickson and all that kind of thing. And the more obscure or the weirder sounding, the better. So my dad got himself a jukebox then, iPod as well, and I helped him set it up. And he would ask me, what new things have you been listening to? Because as much as my dad liked all your classic rock and prog and all that kind of thing, he liked to try and keep up to date with newer music. So I would introduce him to things like Arcade Fire. He really liked Arcade Fire, and he liked Polyphonic Spree when I played him that. But I would always throw in the weirder stuff as well, just to kind of get a rise out of my mum. And it became like a running joke. Like they would be like, oh, what kind of weird stuff are you listening to nowadays? So I would play through the more difficult end of the spectrum in terms of modern music. And one of the ones that they really hated, not so again, so maybe so much my dad, but my mum absolutely despised Aidan Moffat and anything to do with Aidan Moffat. And at that time, I was like hunting for all the stuff that Aidan Moffat was recording. So I loved when he was with Malcolm Middleton and Arab Strap. I loved all the stuff that he did with Lucky Pierre. It was more electronic. And then the albums that he did with the Brokoffs, I think this was the only one. But yeah, this is a fantastic album. How to Get to Heaven from Scotland. And it's Aidan John Moffat doing kind of folky type stuff with a modern twist, but always with that thick Scottish accent. You know, I'm sure Aidan would be the first person to admit he's not a classically trained singer. He's probably not what you would consider a very good singer in the traditional sense of the word, but he has a lovely Scottish drawl, and I love the humour that he puts into his music. And yeah, I just like him as a person. I think he's a cool dude. So yeah, How to Get to Heaven is a great album. This is a box set that comes, I've shown this before, but it's done like an old, is it what they call Mattel games on Chemical Records or Chemical Underground Records. So you've got a board game in here, you've got the LP, you've got a Valentine's card and all the rest of it, but the album itself, if I can dig that out, it's got so many good songs. How to Get to Heaven from Scotland. Big Blonde is an absolute beauty. I think I was living in Germany when this came out, and yeah, I was just obsessed with this album because it was almost like a little taste of home. Living in Germany, I lived in the centre of Dusseldorf, and to be playing this in the flat was brilliant because it was almost like a little piece of Scotland. With songs like Big Blonde and all the references to Woodlands Road and different areas of Glasgow. Ballad of the Unsent Letters, just so morose and downbeat that it kind of, yeah, made me homesick maybe for the for Glasgow and for the West Coast and all that. And I was always sure to give my parents a good listen when I got home, because yeah, it was another one that definitely didn't please the folks. And then obviously you leave home at some point for good, in terms of, you know, my childhood bedroom was away and I'd got married and had my own family, and then at that point there's new people to annoy. My wife is shoulder that burden really well. We don't share the same musical taste at all. There's a little bit of crossover when we first met in the mid-2000s, where we both liked Amy Winehouse, Johnny Cash, a bit of Simon and Garfunkel, and then it completely ended there. So while my wife enjoyed pop music The first gig we went to was Nelly Furtado, not my choice. We've not really had any musical compatibility whatsoever. I'm sure lots of you out there are in the same boat. My wife has to put up with a lot of my musical chat. Helped a lot by the VC since I've been making videos. She's not had to put up with that as much, but the music doesn't go away. The music's still there. She still has to listen to, 2, 3, 4 hours of music every day. And she would say, why is it that your music always dominates the house? Why is it that when I'm cooking, I can hear it blasting through? I would rather go to the dentist than listen to that album again. So I'm going to show you some dentist chair albums or some dentist chair artists. A big one. Oh, this is a biggie. She despises Leonard Cohen. Morose, depressing, he can't sing. That's horrendous, but it's not about the vocal delivery, so to speak. It's about the passion and the wisdom behind those insightful lyrics. It's rubbish. I would rather go to the dentist. So yeah, Leonard Cohen does not get an easy ride in my house, and I love Leonard Cohen. I love playing a bit of Leonard. So yeah, not just I'm Your Man, all the albums are don't get a rough time. So yeah, anything with squealing guitar solos. So I'm not someone really who's massively into long guitar solos or jammy bands, but the stuff like that I do like. That gets shut down very, very quickly. I have to close the door, maybe drop the volume a little bit, because that's the worst, and everybody in the family hates this kind of stuff apart from me. I'll give you a good example. So because my wife's from Germany, I thought maybe we could bond over some German music, but it was never going to work with David Hasselhoff or anything like that. So I went for krautrock instead, and it's probably what my wife hates the most. Birth Control, Voodoo Man. Not just the cover, but the squealing guitars, the incessant Hammond solos. It's just relentless. And the album cover's just the icing on top. Yeah, but she's probably considered the divorce papers a couple of times when I've had this on, because she does not welcome this album being played at all. And I do like to give it a spin now and again. They're a band from Berlin, so I thought that she would enjoy that. I'd say this is a band from your home country, this is your home music, but that just seemed to be like a red flag taboo. So a bit of Birth Control. And there's a whole host of others there. I'm going to stop it there because there's so many. And yeah, that's been like a kind of recurring theme through my life, from my parents to my workplace, especially in the RAF, because you would work and play quite closely, obviously, with the people you work with or the people that you socialise with and you lived with as well. So yeah, I got under a lot of skin there. And then, of course, when I had a family of my own, so it's been one long battle. The vinyl voyage hasn't all been plain sailing. It has been difficult at times. I have got under people's skin, but hey ho, you do what you have to do for the hobby that we love. It's not something we can turn on and or off. It is a part of us. I think listening to music is like breathing air. It's something that I do every day, and I need to do it. And if it means doing it behind closed doors on my own with the earphones on, then so be it. I'm sure there's some of you out there who can relate to this kind of long ramble. It's certainly becoming a ramble now, and have had lots of similar experiences. But yeah, I wanted to get a bit of that off my chest. Like I said, I've wanted to get it off my chest for a long time. And then when I watched Jeff's video about albums that had been banned coming into his family home, it felt like it was the right time to maybe unburden myself in terms of the struggles that I went through, and just trying to have a bit of fun and listening to music. But anyway, I'm going to stop it there, and I'm going to stick some birth control on the record player and crank it up to volume, I'm feeling brave, volume 8. And until the next one, see you later. Bye for now.